Welcome back to Phenomenon Radio live right here on the KGRA digital broadcasting station. Before we begin hour 2 of our interview with tonight's guest, Alejandro Rojas, it's time for the news brought to you by Earthfiles.com. And here's Linda Moulton Howe. Linda?
The South Pole on our moon contains areas that never have darkness. The sun shines on them all the time. That means permanent solar energy, and those all-sun places are logical sites for moon bases. Who gets there and builds first is the question. China has plans to build a base in a year or two, but exploring the South Pole first could be India's claim to fame. By summer of 2018, India's Chandrayaan-2 spacecraft will launch from the nation's spaceport on the Bay of Bengal aboard India's geosynchronous satellite launch vehicle. Their landing site is at a latitude about 70 degrees south to be closer to the moon's sunny South Pole. The plan is to launch the lander from the orbiter on the back side of the moon in order to do a soft landing just after lunar sunrise on a very flat plain about 372 miles from the South Pole. From that lander will come a rover to explore the moon in that uncharted territory for the first time in human history. All NASA and other landings have been near the equator. Instruments aboard the lander and rover will collect data on the moon's helium-3 isotopes, which could end up being fuel for fusion energy reactors in any permanent lunar bases. The Chandrayaan-2 orbiter will also be using cameras and a spectrometer to study how much water there is. It was India's Chandrayaan-1 that first found water molecules on the moon in 2009, when everyone thought that white rock orbiting Earth was completely dry. If more water is found, it could help build a future human base on the moon, or maybe several bases. During its 14 Earth days of exploration, the small lander rover, about the size of a briefcase, will also have a seismometer in the hopes there will be a moonquake while it's there, which could help scientists understand more about the moon's mysterious interior. Is it hollow? Is it chambered? What is in there? And the little rover will have 2 spectrometers to get data about the elemental composition of moon rocks estimated to be more than 4 billion years old. An interesting question is, how will the 2018 Indian rock data compare to the older NASA Apollo rock data? Whatever India learns in 2018 and China maybe a year later, all spacefaring nations on Earth want to take advantage of all that sunshine power at the South Pole. So stay tuned for more news about geopolitical territorial competition for South Pole land on the moon. This is Linda Moulton Howe. Please stay tuned to Earthfiles news updates on KGRA Radio, and visit every day my science, environment, and Real X-Files news website, Earthfiles.com, for more on breaking stories about our universe, this solar system, and the planet we live on.
And that's the news brought to you by Earthfiles.com. And now back to the interview. Here's Linda Moulton Howe. Linda?
Thank you. And I know John was asking before the break, and I will just throw this one in first, Alejandro. In March, Bob Bigelow Aerospace, was on 60 Minutes with Laura Logan, the correspondent. And she asked him some questions which provoked him to say that aliens were under everybody's noses. And to my surprise, no reporter publicly has followed up on that amazing statement. Can you talk about what you may have learned further with Bob Bigelow or anybody about why he said aliens are under everyone's noses?
I think it's awesome that you bring up Bigelow, especially after your following story, because I find him very interesting. I get to do some press pieces at NASA and at different NASA facilities just for stories to write at across the internet. And what I found really interesting, because I get to work with a lot of the reporters that report on this sort of thing, is that not many of them know about Bigelow. They don't really pay that much of attention. They see him as more of kind of a small fry in these things, because you have the Bezos and the Musks and doing all of these exciting things. But you see a big presence at all of these facilities for Bigelow Aerospace. It's obvious that NASA is excited about Bigelow Aerospace. They're excited about their projects and that they want him to be represented in the future of NASA. Because you go to a museum, you're going to see, little models of his habitats and everything. And who is the only guy with, first of all, a plan for a habitat, either in space or especially on planet, because not many people have plans for an on-planet habitat. And that's Bigelow. And what is he pushing and what is he trying to do right now? Get a moon base. And we've heard from Trump just recently that we're focused back on the moon, I think for the reasons that you just talked about. Mm-hmm. I was able to ask Harrison Schmidt, who of course we know worked with all the animal mutilations, what he thinks. Are we on a new space race to the moon? And he said, or are we going to have one? I asked him. And he said, we're already on the way. It's already begun. So Bigelow is really involved with a lot. And at the same time, he's saying aliens are real and aliens are here. I think watching him and his actions kind of answers your question from the last segment. How can they know one thing but be doing something that is so menial, some base on the moon? There's just such a big disconnect. And, his motivations, he's kind of a Rosetta Stone on all of this in a way. And so I find him really fascinating. He doesn't talk to many people, though. He talks to George Knapp. He talks to a lot of these guys in the group, from what I understand. But I have never had a conversation with him, and he's very careful about what he says and who he talks to. And he seems to also be hesitant to talk about UFOs and aliens in public because of his associations with NASA. I've heard that several times from several different people.
But what could be stronger than saying on 60 Minutes to Lara Logan, aliens are under everyone's noses. And when she made that question, aren't you afraid of people thinking you're crazy? He said, I don't give a damn, quote unquote, on 60 Minutes.
Which is a great moment. For me, it's kind of a historic moment, maybe for you guys too. It was a great moment. And so what does he know? I think the big question is, and when I've discussed this with other reporters or journalists, they've said, well, then he's got to prove it. And they put the onus back on him. And he didn't offer any proof to that statement. And that, to all of them I've talked to, then made them think, well, this is just nothing because he's not giving us to work with. And unfortunately, as far as I understand, those who pursue to find out more, they're just met with a wall of silence. They just don't talk to many reporters. And you rarely do see Bigelow interviews. In fact, from what I understand, that one was pretty old. And they aired it like a year or so after they originally recorded it. So what he knows and why is really hard to say. You've got NID reports from his old group, National Institute of Discovery Sciences. Those reports are interesting. I mean, they're well investigated. Of course, some of the people that are in the Stars Academy worked on some of those reports. So you do get the sense that his organization felt there was, paranormal phenomena, and they were pursuing answers. And that kind of plays along with this theme of what Bigelow and his group has been doing all along, because this is just kind of the latest iteration of that, is looking for answers, sharing certain things, and whether or not these people who they're working with know more or not, it's only a drip. We're only getting drips of information.
And 2 years ago, he told George Knapp in an interview that he was I think I'm saying this correctly. If I'm not, please correct me. But I understood him to say to George that he was the only person with a NASA contract to put I'm going to call his blow up buildings in the real estate on Mars. And if Bigelow Aerospace has the only contractual agreement with NASA for him to get his blow up buildings on Mars, then that means that he has a very unique and special relationship, both for the moon and for Mars with NASA in the United States. You would think that would put him, up there with Lockheed.
I think you're exactly correct. I think it's one of these stories that people haven't caught on, and just how important Bigelow is to NASA. NASA's last project, what they were focused on completely was going to Mars. That was their big goal with the Orion project. Trump has said, nope, we're not going to Mars anymore. We're going to the moon. And now we kind of have to, because you just talked about how China and India and Russia are also planning on it. So we got to get there first. And who's the guy who's working on bases on both of those places? That's Bigelow. So Bigelow is very, very important. He's ahead of the game. Elon Musk, even though he wants to go to Mars, he's got no plans for a habitat. He's got no real plan. He hasn't even discussed a real plan for what these habitats will be like. So he's not even prepared to have people stay there like he wants to do at this point. And that's something he's got to figure out if he wants to do this in the next couple of years. But Bigelow has a plan. He's the only guy who's really been working with NASA to move forward with this plan. And so, it could be, and it comes back to this kind of where they perhaps have to be kind of dualists themselves, where they've got to work in, quote unquote, the real world, the space world, and work within those parameters. And at the same time, they work in different parameters in different arenas for what they, and it's just this game, it's this dance, and we're watching, and we could debate whether or not we benefit from it, but it's this dance that goes on.
But the truth is the truth. And there is an alien presence on this planet, throughout this solar system, and I've been told throughout the Milky Way galaxy and beyond. And for us to be on a planet in the middle of the 21st century where we are near, and that there is some 1% power that has the ability to keep us all in the dark, except for a few that are making money off of everything they're back engineering and having trade routes, I cannot fathom how this big lie that has been there for more than 70 years, really, but the modern lie, I can't fathom how it can keep going on much further. And that's why I am hoping that Luis Elizondo and this group, even if they don't know a lot, if what you're saying is true, that they are really truly going to try to leverage things open by coming to people like you, me, and others who are also dealing with whistleblowers that have a hell of a lot of information. And that goes to what John was asking before the break. John?
Well, guys, first of all, I mean, I personally, based on what I've seen this group do so far, and when we were going into the break, we're talking about a rudderless ship. And when you say that these guys don't talk to each other, everything's compartmentalized, and they don't know this or this person doesn't know that, and it could be taking place in this group. You pick Tom DeLonge as your PR guy, which is a disaster from the beginning, because if you want people to take you serious, you need to have a group formed of credible people with scientific backgrounds. You need to come forward with somebody in a public relations way that stays to script. And what I mean by script is you have to have a plan, and you have to start at spot A, say we're going to start educating people and we're going to get them to understand. We need to go to the New York Times and we need to explain to them thoroughly what we have, where we're going, how we're doing this, so they do the article right. Then we have follow-up groups to talk about this on mainstream news. I watched these mainstream news responses. There wasn't any scientific response back on this. All they had was a bunch of political hacks that are on there every day arguing about which side's better, Republican or Democrats, and why can't we all get along and everything else. And they threw their little 2 cents worth in, half of them laughing at it. There was no real discussion on mainstream news in any way, shape, or form on any of this, to include, if you're going to bring people on that are going to try to sell the physics behind it, you should have other scientists on there evaluating at the panel and should be talking about. And then if you can't get mainstream to do it, then groups like Open Minds who have these conferences, you should have a panel of scientists coming out and discussing this so the public understands it better. But no, we have a crazy man in Tom DeLonge running around, changes his mind every 2 days. You have all these guys coming out there saying, trust us, but we have documents that we can't talk to you about because they're still classified. Robert Bigelow controls all this and has all these reports, but we're not going to tell you about them. But at the end of the day, donate money to us, and we're going to help move this forward. Tell me where I'm wrong on this.
You know what? I think that the way you summarize that is certainly a way to see this, and there's no doubt about that. And I don't. I've expressed similar ideas. I've even used that same phraseology that, Tom DeLonge is your marketing guy. From October until December, we only heard from Tom DeLonge. And then December happens, and now they want to put a new face on things, and we only hear from Elizondo. We hear from a pilot. We hear a little bit from Leslie and from the pilot or Chris Mellon, but that's about it. None of the other group are talking. Elizondo is the front guy for this, and they've figured out now with, the help, now that they've got this New York Times story out, that this is kind of the direction, with the face they want to put forward. And Tom DeLonge's been completely gone, silent, underground, not talking to anybody. So you're right. I think they identified that problem, and at least post New York Times have addressed it, but it was a confusing thing. And how can you expect anybody to understand what you're trying to do with this kind of schizophrenic face, and at the same time say, trust me, just like you said. So here's another question. How come the New York Times hasn't followed up with an article with some physicists?
Michio Kaku, I may not say his name right, Kaku, however you say it. He hasn't really even been interviewed on any of this. So here we have this group stepping forward that's supposed to be here to help humanity, yet it's totally a mess. We now have been told, well, we held materials that we have.
It's only been 45 days, though. I mean, I think.
But you can't have something this important and have this so rudderless.
Yes, you can. I mean, think about it. To be honest, and I'm not picking on you in particular, but look at the Rendlesham Forest case. That's one of the biggest things you hear all of the time. Why hasn't John said the same thing? Why hasn't John done this? Why hasn't Jim done this? Why hasn't Charles done that? And what are we supposed to believe? Because everybody's telling us something different. But it's something that happened. Or let's say MUFON. Why are they doing this? Everybody says something different. There's all this infighting. It's people, especially in the public, there's a lot of different viewpoints. And when people try to work together to move towards something, especially at the beginning of something, everything has to coalesce. You got to give people time to put things together. I think what they're saying is, hey, we all believe that there's something to the UFO phenomena. At least this is what the public face, and we want to move towards that. We don't necessarily know what to do. There's different messages that have come out, and we haven't come out with a strong message, but here's our idea, and here's what we're moving towards, and here's what we can give you. And they've given us something. Why aren't scientists involved? Because they don't have anything to work with. That, like you said, a lot of this information is classified. They haven't been provided any of the science. What was the science that the DOD did? We don't know. We need much more of that film to know anything. Leslie Kane told me that we can't get any more of the film because, they only let out part of the film that didn't show anything that's classified, because so much in an active military environment is classified. Procedures and craft and technology. And so we don't have enough to go off of. There's nothing for a scientist to work on. And how do they deal with the media and the way the media wants to work with it? All they want to hear is talk to Elizondo and the pilot, ask 2 or 3 questions, ask them about aliens so they can make a joke, and that's all. And so they are providing right now what the media wants. The media doesn't want to talk to any scientists.
But hopefully wait a minute. Slow down 1 minute. Okay.
Yeah.
They claim this clip is enough to say what that pilot was dealing with isn't from here.
That's not true. That's not true at all.
Well, then please explain it, because the way it's just been explained is they say what they're observing, what these pilots observed, couldn't be from planet Earth. So are you now saying that, no, that isn't what they're saying?
No, they're saying that from our examination of this case and others, we believe there's technology visiting us that's not of our own. Here's a small clip from one of the videos that leads us to believe that. But what that means is that's one of their tiny pieces of bits and pieces of evidence, such a small piece that you can't really even do anything with it. They're saying that everything they've looked at as a whole, what we have yet to see, is what makes him believe that.
So wait a minute. So okay, these guys don't know that much. Yet what they do know, they can't tell us because it's still classified, but we have to trust them. But what little there is there, we're to believe this isn't our technology and it's from somewhere else. But no one else outside their little group, including physicists that wouldn't be breaking any codes of secrecy, have stepped forward and analyzed this and made any kind of determination on what we're dealing with.
Well, that's, we don't know who's looked at it. I mean, I think you're making a lot of really good points that we know very little, and they're asking us to do a lot with very little, and they're hoping that people will do that, and people are doing that, at least to the tune of $2.5 million.
Remember, I don't think anybody has ever disputed that the General Twining assessment at the request of Harry Truman, within the 1 week after the 3 wedge-shaped vehicles were retrieved, they were 3 landing sites, one near Corona, New Mexico, one in White Sands, and one that was east of Alamogordo. And that's what I'm referencing. And Truman requested General Twining to go directly to the Roswell area, and Truman wanted General Twining to be the one who gave him a personal report. And we have ended up with that document through the work of Bob Wood when he bought the Timothy Cooper, we'll call them the documents from the printing press down in White Sands. That's the category they are in. And the Twining memo, I've talked with Stanton about this and others. It has never, ever once been attacked or refuted. And what is it talking about? It is a general who has all of the details down to the fact that they may be looking at some kind of a water-based fusion plant as a propulsion system. It talks about some kind of symbols on keys. All of this is in a document from a General Twining in the first week or the second week of July 1947. And what was the main scientist that was talking with Twining and Truman and everybody else? It was Vannevar Bush, or some people say Vannevar Bush. And he was MIT. He did breakthroughs on the development of what became computers. He was a brilliant man, and he was working with scientists. And if you take the documents that we have that have been holding up now for 30 years that come from 1947, they had working language about atomic propulsion systems in these craft. In one of the documents about what came down in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, it is called right in the document a neutronic propulsion device that was hand delivered to Robert Oppenheimer. That was the man charged with the development of the atomic bomb. So that huge underbelly of very bright, brilliant scientists was right there from the very beginning with FDR and Truman. And all of that work had to have been passed baton to scientists today that would explain that we have back-engineered craft, we have back-engineered technology, that the whole fiber optics, as I understand it, and Philip J. Corso said, fiber optics is part of what we got from inside the walls of the craft we retrieved in New Mexico. That's science. But why is it not out to all the universities of the planet?
I don't know. I mean, if that scenario is true. And I think that there certainly is reason to doubt many of these memos, at least to say that we can't for sure trace them back to show that they are real. Twining memo, the original Twining memo that was an assessment of the UFO situation in the beginning, certainly that one is obtained by FOIA. It's got you can find its background. The others you still can't prove. Unfortunately, with that analysis that's been done, you can't say for sure. And Timothy Cooper, it certainly is not a credible source, I don't feel. I mean, he worked with
Bob,
we could go over all of that, but regardless, if that's true,
I think that it is legitimate, and I could give reasons. But let's just say, let's take the Twining memo. That Twining memo.
Let's say that though. Let's take that.
It's a gold nugget in the last 70 years that shows that this government had the smartest general, the smartest scientist for the president of the United States, and they were doing high-class technical reports in that week right after the crash retrievals in Roswell.
Yeah, I'm sure there's many, many secrets that I am not made aware of. And as to why those secrets are being held, I don't know. I can't say for sure. And perhaps there are reasons that patriots would say, hey, I'm going to keep this secret now that I understand what's going on here. Or maybe they just have been, I don't know why the secrets are kept, what all secrets are kept. I don't know.
Well, there is the huge rub, because there have been whistleblowers. I'm sure, Alejandro, you've had whistleblowers come to you. I certainly have, and they have shown me enough documentation of their background and career, even if they can't go on TV, is what they say, that I don't have any doubt that we have evolved technology in a black secret space program, and that there have been people who have, before they've died, they've wanted people like me to know. And that even though I can't put them on television or radio, I believe these people have told me the truth, and that we are on a schizophrenic planet, concocted, and that the black budgets, the black money that have been built around the secret, that we're not alone in the universe, and that we have been back engineering technology from someplace else since at least World War II, and that we have had meetings with non-humans, and that somebody somehow has been keeping that from the planet. It's astounding.
So, I mean, and I think we work in that twilight. You're talking about what's hidden and what isn't seen, and you're right. There's certainly a lot that's hidden and isn't seen, and then there's what's in the light, what people know, which is very little, and people like us work in the twilight to try to gather these pieces of information and try to put light on them. And from that sense, putting on my, Pollyanna rose-colored glasses here, at least we have these gentlemen now pretending, at the very least, to be advocates. And certainly I think that Bigelow has been able to get information that's very interesting out. And I think these guys have so far in this New York Times story and all the other stories that came out. And I think they're going to be sharing more tonight with George Knapp and at our conference, and then even more going forward. We've got the third video. So at the very least, I think we've got a little bit being lit up some more, even if it's just the crumbs under the table that the mouse would have scurried away with. It's something, and I guess that's just what we can do for now, and look for outlets for more.
But the crumbs don't work, and I'll tell you why.
Well, they're all you get, so
I know, but it doesn't work.
But I'll tell you why. You can bang your head against the wall all you want, but if that's all we got, that's all we got.
But here's a different perspective, okay? I was involved in an incident. And you brought that up earlier about we can't seem to all come together on the story itself. Okay, but ultimately, this group identified three things they want to talk about. They want to go into video, so they want to show the world that there's something out there they can't explain. But we have more information, but we can't tell you because it's classified. But we really don't know. but we really don't work for the government anymore. But we have classified reports that the only way we can look at them and still be involved with them is we have to still be working for the government, because the only way we can look at these classified reports, still have them, is we have a security clearance. Okay, so that's phase number one. Phase number two, we're holding this material that we're working on, that we're trying to develop this technology, and we have it in these buildings up in Bigelow, possibly Bigelow's facility. And we're going to work on them, and we're going to discuss this technology too. So A and B are things that people are going to attack and try to tear apart just because it's human nature. But also the factor is that they haven't got their act together. They just don't. And that scares me, because the third one they want to go into is the people that have had contact or experiences with whatever this is, which, by the way, we don't really know what it is, because they tell you that we're dealing with something that's not our technology, but we don't really know what it is and where it's from. But ultimately, we're going to go to C, which is the experiencers and how it could have affected them, or why it affected them in the first place. And we're going to address that too, which is a disaster, is a total disaster, because people that have had these experiences, that have been involved in these experiences, to include the military people, which is what they basically have been studying, do not need this to be handled this way. They owe us the responsibility to get their acts together and start handling this in a professional way, where people can start to understand this. Because sooner or later, if the wrong thing happens, it could cause a lot of problems for a lot of people.
You know, I think that's where we see things differently. They have no responsibility to you and I whatsoever. They're private citizens. They don't have to lift a finger for you or for me. They don't have to do anything, but they are. And that's their motivation for why they're doing it. That could be in question, but they are doing something. They don't owe us anything at all.
They do owe us something. If they're
Why do they owe us something? They're not government personnel. They're retired.
Let me explain this. If they're going to step forward with this type of information that can change the world, they have to be responsible with it.
So what's the alternative? Not to step forward at all because we're not.
If you're not going to handle it right, yes. It causes more problems and more chaos if you don't do it right than to say nothing at all.
Well, there we go. Now there's something we disagree on. I don't feel that way. I feel like if people, I think it's good that people step forward. Otherwise, we wouldn't have whistleblowers, people who do their best to try to get information out, despite what's going to happen, because they feel it's the right thing to get the information out. I don't, I think that's important. And none of us, can be confident that we're doing the right thing. I think in the past have been nervous about some of the things you've done, but, talking about you and shedding light on stuff, the work you've done has been great. I am so grateful and happy for what you've done and the information you've been able to get out. And if you ever felt, self-doubt, I am glad you went forward, because I think it's been a positive thing. And I feel the same way with these guys, if indeed that's what they're doing. So I think so far we've had positive. I think that the media, it's a new thing. You can't talk about UFOs without mentioning that the DOD was investigating them and taking them seriously now. We haven't had.
What proof do we have? Wait a minute, let me ask you that. That's an important question. What proof? Because the DOD came back and denied it after the fact.
Well, they didn't deny it. They said that the funding went from 2007 to 2012. But then you do have the person who instigated the program, Harry Reid, saying, "I'm proud that I started the program. It was something that we did." You have Lou Elizondo, who they haven't denied ran the program, saying, "Yes, we ran it and we took this seriously." So we know at least this department took it seriously. And like Linda was talking about, and even other government records that you can get online from the government, you can show they've taken, and stuff you've been able to discover, that they've taken this seriously, much more seriously for all along. And,
well, no, I'm not arguing the fact that they've taken this seriously or they've looked at it. So
at least now we have this in the public, though. You have the guy who worked for the DOD saying, "I did this," and the DOD saying, "Yes, he did do this. We stopped funding in 2012. That's all they've said. But he said, "Yeah, they did stop funding." But
I agree. But here's the problem: they denied that they cleared these videos to be released. The fact of what you discussed
they did
earlier,
deny that. And
yeah, there actually was. There was a follow-up article that said they never did claim that they authorized the release of these.
The department that said that was the Department of Intelligence, which is different than the Department of Defense. And the group, or at least Leslie certainly has, and I don't know, I can't remember right now if Lou has said this publicly, but that they weren't the department we were under. So the department, the Defense Intelligence did not release anything. And they're the ones who said we didn't release anything. So
right, but who's going to analyze this then? Wouldn't Defense Intelligence be the ones that would have to analyze this, and B, they would have to turn around and tell everybody if it's a threat or not?
Not necessarily. We don't know for sure because we don't know how the ATIP was what some of us like to call it, how they operated. We don't know their procedures, who they work with. We know from other government agencies, and even like, for instance, Nick Pope says this with the UK government and their program. Chile is the same way. They rely on the resources of whoever comes to them. So, for instance, if the Navy comes to them and says, hey, we got this case, we don't know what the hell this is, will you help us out? Then the Navy is lending those resources for them to do these things. So it's a Navy who's helping them out. People like Bruce McAfee used to be a Navy physicist, optical physicist. So it might not be Defense Intelligence. And from what I understand, they didn't have a role in this. So you're right, though. The DOD has been very quiet about this, and they're going to have to start saying more at some point. But these are all questions. This is why I'm dying to hear from Elizondo, because these are questions we ask them, and I'm dying to hear the answers. I think it's going to be really interesting.
But let me finish one more thing, Linda.
John,
Linda, I'd like to follow up with one more, please. Okay. What you're trying to sell me right now, based on my military background, okay, in the 40s and 50s, they didn't have these agencies, or they were in their infancy stages. But when you have an incident take place, that particular information immediately goes to intel within the agency involved, whether it's the Navy, the Air Force, but it's immediately given to a case manager higher up in Defense Intelligence. It immediately is forwarded to them because it's a working project on a potential threat. Now, the second video, which is the gimbal video, they claim was in an operational footing, not in a training footing, and that's why they won't even release the area that took place. But the story that they're trying to sell us themselves doesn't add up.
Yeah, those are interesting questions, and we're going to find out more. I don't think that, but we do have these admissions that this department existed. As for Defense Intelligence involvement, we don't even know how Elizondo got those videos released, because the Washington Post said that they had this memo that showed that Elizondo kind of did it under false pretense. He said he was going to do it for educational purposes, but then use those videos to show that UFOs are real. So, however, Lou and especially Leslie has said that's not the case. And Leslie said she's got the memo, and she's read it, but she can't share the whole memo, but that the memo does not say that at all. So that's another question that Lou needs to ask directly, which we've got in there, and hopefully he'll answer that soon. How did you get those videos released? We don't know yet. So, a lot of questions still need to be answered because otherwise people have problems. People see red flags like you.
Alejandro, can you explain how this is going to go at the UFO Congress? You're going to, starting with, is it in a conference room with a screen, and that you're going to project the video interview with Elizondo? Is that how it's going to work?
Yes, that's exactly correct. So what we'll do is 4:00 on Saturday, we'll start it. First, I'm going to give people background to get people up to speed on, the story, the To the Stars, and how they made their announcement and how we got here in the first place, and then about the New York Times to get people up to speed, because a lot of times people don't pay attention to the minute by minute like we do. And then we'll show the video of Elizondo, and then we'll have a little bit of discussion between Nick Pope and I, and then we'll do Q&A for that. But unfortunately, people are only going to be able to ask us questions, and maybe, you'll be there. So it'd be interesting from input from a lot of different people.
Well, I'm wondering, would you consider the possibility of having 3 or 4 of us be there for different perspectives?
Well, we we're not sure how much time we're going to have. And that was an original idea, but it doesn't seem like we're going to have very much time for that. But we've got, so conversation will just have to kind of be, we had to be very fluid in all of this, setting it all up. We've been working with, To the Stars for a while, and Tom DeLonge, and they've wanted to, have a presence and do a presentation, but it's evolved, almost on a weekly basis for months. And so, this is where we are today. And it's looking like, we might not have the time for many people to comment, which is in a way a good thing, because it means that we've got a lot more time with Lou Elizondo answering questions, because we've got 75 questions, and all of these ones that we've been asking, and of course these are very important things for people to know, and there's so many questions.
How long will the tape run?
The tape is going to run, we don't have a final count yet, but probably about 45 minutes.
And usually you have 90-minute programs, so that would leave 45 minutes for Q&A.
Well, that would leave, but we got to bring people up to speed first, and I don't think I can do that with it even in 15 minutes. So it's going to be at least that much time for that. So, we'll see what we can do. We're still putting all this together.
Okay.
So you haven't seen the interview yourself yet?
That's true. I have not. I should hopefully be seeing it in the next day or two.
Okay.
Well, definitely in the next day or two.
So you have no idea if the questions were addressed or...
I do. I've been in contact with Lou quite a bit, and he wants to answer every single question. And that's what he's been fighting for, is to make sure he can answer every single question. And they said they got to pretty much all of them. He couldn't answer all of them, but that they got to, but still, Lou wishes he could have had even more time to answer Q&A from people. So I in that much time, they must have gotten to quite a few questions.
Who asked the questions?
The questions were from a few from us, but mostly from listeners and readers, followers of Open Minds and of the UFO Congress. We've been asking them to submit stuff, and they've been submitting.
But
questions.
who does the interview? Who's the person?
The interview is being done by Tom DeLonge's group.
But who in the group is what I'm asking? Who's going to be the one that does the question asking?
It's not Tom. I don't think Tom was even there when they did it. From what I understand, if I recall correctly, he wasn't even there.
Okay, well, because to me, professionalism matters, okay? And we're no longer, and I'm not trying to bash the UFO conferences that they do and the format that they handle them in, but we've gone way past that in the way ufology is handled this now. We now have a group of people that hold clearances that are stepping forward and saying we're not alone in this world in different ways. We have Robert Bigelow, who's working with Department of Defense and NASA on a project to take us to the stars, okay? Whether, it starts on the moon, goes to Mars, and goes further. So we've got all this now being introduced to the general public, and it needs to be handled in a proper and professional way. And that's where I'm telling you they owe us that. And when you say they don't, you're right. They didn't have to come out with this, but they have an agenda. And Bigelow has an agenda to take us to the stars. And if they're going to do it, it should be done correctly. And it should be done in a professional way. And everything should be addressed in a way where is like when you have come forward with information, it needs to be pretty airtight. And it needs to be able to be answered if there is a question immediately, not drug around in the mud for a while and no one steps up and really wants to answer it. Do you understand what I'm trying to say about all this?
I hear your frustration. On the other hand, I believe that they've done their best. I believe Tom DeLonge's heart is in the right place. I believe all of these people, from what I've experienced, I have no reason to believe otherwise. Lou has been more open and forward than I ever could have imagined. Same with Jim Semivan. These are people, and you guys have talked to Howe Putoff, maybe even Nolan, one of the other scientists, part of their group. And you've probably talked to Colm Kelleher and George Knapp, who is, of course, works very closely with Bigelow. These are people who I think are doing their best, just like we all try to do. And so, that's what I think. And I think that what they've done is not necessarily been as organized as one would hope, but they're getting out. There's a lot of positives to be taken. If you consider just 2 months ago, how things have changed and all this information that we've gotten, it amounts to a lot.
Well, Alejandro, I'm going to make a statement. This is probably not going to set well, but okay, these are all government people. They're used to the government way. We're 20 trillion in debt. Nothing that the government does ends up very well for the American people. So if they're handling this project like a government project, I guess we can explain a lot of why this isn't going the way it is. Not the fact that they're not good people or they want to try to get some information out. But again, this is like earth-shattering. And what I mean by that is that the headlines ever come out or the President of the United States comes out and says we're not alone in this world, it will change us. I think 9/11 changed the way the world was. This would be the biggest thing that would change the world. And if they're taking this on, it needs to be done in a professional way. And I just don't see it. And I'm concerned as an experiencer. And what I mean is I'm not saying I was abducted by aliens or anything else. I'm not really sure what happened to me. But what I do know is when they're going to address this at some point, I hope they handle this a lot better than they have the first part of the rollout.
Well, I just don't understand how people can try to hold them to standards that we don't even hold ourselves to. We all try to do our best, but that doesn't mean we're going to be executing things at the highest level, especially
when you have this type of
resources
coming out, Alejandro. This isn't.
What about your type of information? I mean, I think the same could be argued. What about you and the witnesses? Why didn't you get together and only after you researched and figured out everything and were organized in how you're going to go to the press, didn't you release information? I think that argument can be made for all of us.
I don't disagree, but there's a difference between
such a high bar.
Alejandro, wait a minute. There's a difference between our incident and the fact that you have a United States full-bird colonel that's lied and been caught in a lie and has kept this deception going for a long time for whatever reason, and coming to the world and saying we're not alone. I never came to the world, or neither has this incident, other than Halt has come the closest to say that it was ET that we encountered. I have never tried to tell the world that we're not alone or, by God, whatever it was, what we were dealing with. But when you step out into that box and start saying that kind of stuff, that's where you've got to be very careful and be responsible.
You believe what you experienced was otherworldly?
No, not necessarily. I don't know what I experienced.
But you're coming out, you don't know what you experienced, but I think it'd be fair to say that you would say it was extraordinary.
Yeah, it's extraordinary
And you nor your colleagues knew what had happened or what that was.
Well, some of them have gone on the record to say it was time travelers or it was extraterrestrial, and I haven't done that because I don't know. Right. And I've tried to understand this, and I turn to people in science, and I turn to people that work inside these projects to try to get an answer. And the bottom line to me is this is the most important thing. Are we alone? Where do we come from? Who are we? And if you're going to step forward with this kind of information, you need to handle it properly. That's my point.
I know. But what we have is one pilot who is kind of similar to you. He had this extraordinary experience while he was in the military. And he's sharing that experience. And he is going further than you. And he is saying, I believe we're not alone from what I witnessed. Similar to other witnesses, in the military that have come forward. Elizondo is not saying that. Elizondo is saying it's technology beyond our own. I don't know what it is, but it's not human. Essentially, he doesn't even say it that way. He just said it's technology that's not ours. And that's his experience. And he wants people to know that we are witnessing that stuff. I don't see how that is so bad. I don't understand how
it is when you start asking for money. Oh, wait a minute. See, that's the other factor. They're asking for money now.
Yeah. Well, the Academy is asking for money. I mean, the New York Times wasn't about asking for money, nor did it even cover the aspect about asking for money. So that was that was more about revealing information. Certainly the Tom DeLonge October thing was about asking for money, and the group, does want money for their organization. But here again, I mean, what they've been able to accomplish thus far is
but that's the difference between what you and I are saying, though. I'm not saying they haven't accomplished anything. I'm not saying they're not trying. I'm not saying they're not nice people. What I'm saying is this is probably one of the most important things to face mankind, or could be, and it needs to be done in a professional way, and it needs to be thought out thoroughly and executed properly. And I don't think that's what's taking place. And I hope moving forward they do a better job.
I think your standards are very, very high. And I think the world's out there. People are doing their best. And I'm even going to stand up for the government, because you know what? We're not Mexico. We're not any of these third world countries. We're a strong country. And we wouldn't be where we are if it wasn't for our government and our military. And they're not the best, but they're doing what they can, and we're in a pretty good position compared to the rest of the world. And I think that's something that we should be thankful for. You're one of those people who worked for the government so much that protected us and kept us going, and you're one of the person to be thanked. And I think people are doing their best, and I think they hear them. I think that they need to hear your message. I think that they need to hear why people specifically are frustrated with some of the things they've gone about things, because I think that feedback will then make them adjust their strategies. But I think that they have changed since December.
Alejandro, what do you think the last 70 years would have been like if Churchill and Truman had announced in World War II, we are dealing with non-humans and advanced technologies, and it may have something to do with the German side of the war. And what we want is for every person on the planet to let us know what you see in the sky or the water or the land, because we now are entering a new phase in which other intelligence in this universe is clearly on this planet Earth. Do you think that the whole rest of the last 70 years could have been different and maybe even less violent if all of the truth that they knew even then had been told to the world at once?
Now, I want to answer that, but we're letting somebody off the hook here, and a big player, and that is this third party, whoever may be coming here. Because if there's a big secret to be held, they're certainly holding this big secret, because at any time they could be revealing themselves.
That secrecy serves the intelligence as well as the humans that are keeping it secret, I would agree.
Yeah, so if we would have known that, I like to think, it's so hard to say. I am for it. I think that, when people come across information, it should be shared, especially that's big, that affects our entire planet. So where would we be? Hopefully we would be, and I would imagine we would be in a much, much better place. I think we would understand our world better. We would have moved together to solve whatever issues or dangers that we faced from knowing this information, and we would have been stronger and faced them and dealt with them better. So yeah, I agree with you. I think it would have been better off.
And that's the sad, astounding position we are in now, that the planet is so schizophrenic, and it really is schizophrenic because so much has been built on policies of lies, deception, and dishonesty. How do you put it back to a square where once upon a time humans at least tried to be honorable with each other? Now we have governments that do nothing but lie. And that, to me, that's the saddest thing, that in trying to keep a secret and allegedly to keep the world intact, a national security move, we now are on a planet that is impossibly split, and that we are heading out. We've already been in space as far as I am understanding. And so It's almost as if Homo sapiens sapien already has a breakaway civilization, God only knows how many places, while Earth, the original home, is being treated like it's a game.
Yeah, I agree with you. But I like to think, we're not the only planet to go through what we're going through right now. I wouldn't imagine. I mean, if you look at nature, things happen repetitively, and no doubt there are thousands of, if not, well, I'm sure millions, if not more, civilizations out there, many of which have gone through what we've gone through. And for some reason, that gives me some comfort in that there's somebody out there who probably knows what's going on, and hopefully is watching after us a bit. But
we're coming up to the end. It has been a real pleasure to be able to go through all of this with you, and that I'm hoping that at the UFO Congress, where I'm going to be there to do a presentation on military whistleblowers, that if there is a possibility that 4 or 5 of us can be a panel after the Luis Elizondo videotape, to consider that, because it would be very interesting to have a wide view of perspectives. So
thank you.
God bless you for being here, and let's hope that everything keeps going forward positively toward the world being honest again. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Great to be here. I agree with you.
For Linda Moulton Howe, John Burroughs, and Alejandro Rojas, thanks for listening. Now stay tuned for 3 hours of Jimmy Church and Fade to Black live right here on the station that brings you the very best in paranormal talk radio, on the internet, KGRA radio.com. Good night, everyone.